So, where is everybody? This should be the beginning of the Conversational Experiments Network Weaving session, done in part in collaboration with Movement Weavers Open Space. So some people would be coming from there, I think. Hi, Tammy.
Hi. How are you? Oh my
I'm
God, I miss you so much.
I miss you too. Wolf, it's just you
Yes,
and I. Haven't seen you for a while.
I know. I know. Yeah, I miss being in your energy and
Well, it's always there. It's not
I
going
know
anywhere.
it's just life is crazy.
Yes, it is sometimes.
Yeah. Cool. Oh my gosh.
All
Okay,
right.
what is this John, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think Jeremy is John, if I remember right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. Every room I go in, I have to change my name.
Oh, well, that sucks, but
But kind of interesting. You could be anyone.
Yeah,
yeah,
I know.
I should try that too. Just start with a random name and sometimes forget to change it.
Well, we do when we broadcast we do a sports show and we broadcast from Zoom, and so we always use creative names during each broadcast. So we're always someone different.
Ah, I'd like that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Hi,
Well,
Cheryl.
Hi.
hey, hi, Kitty.
Hi, Sarah.
So this is in part what's it called? Multi-production with Movement Weavers, meaning this meeting is part of an open space session from Movement Weavers, but some people come here through different channels. So that's part of what I think is interesting to explore, like what happens when groups or networks overlap, and how do we play in that space? How do we, first of all, create networks, and what happens when we make networks of networks, and when groups overlap? Is that a good thing? It probably is, but how do we deal with that? How can we better make that flow? And I came just from another session, which in the first block of open space sessions, which was a system constellation, which actually we've tried to do in this group too at a previous point. That's sort of like we represent some problem or issue or organism or something, and each person takes on a particular aspect of it or a particular role, and then we just sort of intuitively will see what happens. So I was being surprised, the unexpected in relation to shifting from one paradigm to the other. So just connecting with I love open space, so I find it very interesting, sort of this shift from sort of you walk from one space to another and it's a little different, but you still take something with you.
What's the difference between movement weavers and conversational experiments?
Not very much. Your sound is a little bit low today. Not very much. I mean, it's kind of the same kind of people. So, which is one of the interesting things that like Doug always says that he goes to very many different groups and it's sort of kind of the same. It isn't totally the same, but you meet the same world-changing, creative, friendly, present people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, first of all, there's something interesting in that. Like, well, are we really much bigger than we think? Like everywhere we go, we meet this kind of people. I think quite possibly. Then what do we do with that? And well, do we still need lots of different groups? Probably yes. I'm certainly not suggesting we make them all like one organization or something. but I'd like to explore how to what then what. I mean, it's that there's another group. It's a little different, has slightly different traditions, little different verbiage around it, but otherwise it's a similar idea. People want to do something or show up for something, and they sort of interweave their activities, and they show up for each other and have the conversations that they feel need to emerge. And that's kind of what we do here. And it reminds me of like what we do here. Even if we do something different each time here, it's kind of the same. Like I come up with a different experiment each time, but really in another way, we sort of show up in the same way each time. Not that that's not in the boring same kind of way, but we're present no matter what curveballs get thrown at you, which is part of the theme here, to try to do it differently and see how we find each other again anyway.
So there's not really a difference in the subject matter of the topics.
No, I mean, the thing that was just happening today and also last week was an open space, which means people show up and they suggest some topics or activities, and then people go and join whichever one they like, which I totally like. I've had trouble finding good ways of organizing that online, but the approach that's being used there works quite well. Like you show up in one Zoom session, and there are some other Zoom rooms available, and you make a little Google Doc where you note what's going to go on in each one, and then you sort of take off and join another one of them. I like that.
So you can pop in and out?
Yeah, which you can't. I mean, the Zoom room itself has a feature of breakout rooms, and in the past we've tried to use that as an open space kind of thing, but it kind of sucks for that because the administrator has to assign you to a room. You can't just sort of be the bumblebee who goes in and out, or the butterfly. You can't just sort of leave whenever you feel like. Well, you can leave when you feel like, but you can't just join another room. So it's a little. It doesn't quite fit the open space model.
That's a good point. That's a consideration that I didn't think of for facilitating those types of conversations.
Yeah, like technically,
having the separate links.
Technically, there are certain features needed, and it's solved in Move and Weavers by having separate links, which I'm not totally sure how they do that. Might be several people's accounts, or that might be the reason that the breakout room is meant to be 40 minutes because a free Zoom room will break off after 40 minutes. If one hasn't paid for the service, then it only lasts for 40 minutes, which is okay for a short session.
Mm-hmm.
How much does Zoom cost per year?
For one person, it costs like $14 a month, something like that.
By one person, you mean you can host all this?
Yeah, I can host as many meetings as I want for that. But I cannot have two at the same time, which is the problem of it. So if I want two at the same time, I need to pay for several, which I do incidentally, and then I offer them to other people who seem to need them, like Tammy. Tammy is a power user of Zoom, so that's a very well spent investment there. So but it's a limitation of the software a little bit, that you can't do several at the same time. So how do you manage an open space kind of thing? Even if I paid for 6 different users simultaneous, it wouldn't be very fluid to move from one to the other. You get odd messages about you want to disconnect, and you sort of disappear and come back, and it's a little awkward. So I've made suggestions to the Zoom people, but I mean, of course, they don't listen to everybody, but they haven't given that much priority.
How do you share with Tammy? Do you give her a code?
So like that essentially I pay for 3 accounts, and essentially that means that 3 people can have their own account where they just log in and schedule meetings. So I don't have to have anything to do with it.
And how do they have access? Like in the same way that you would have access to someone's Amazon or Audible?
Yeah, but even though it's a shared account, they don't step on each other. But but they do have a bit of a link. So like if, for example, if Tammy shows up for this meeting first, then she will be the host because she got there first and she's part of that account, whereas you wouldn't, for example.
And
so what? Yeah,
just
say something.
just for the record, thank you, Fleming. It's really been. I'm super grateful to have your support, and yeah.
I couldn't think of a better use for it. You get a ton of mileage out of it.
Yeah.
So what is, I mean, where network weaving, we made it the topic, and or overlapping networks, like what needs to be done with that? Maybe nothing, but I don't know. Are we wasting time by sort of showing up into different groups and saying more or less the same thing and listening to some other people over again and who are doing nice things, and then we do that again tomorrow? Is that productive? I don't know.
Well, your question is making me wonder, is it mostly to showcase or what people are doing and hopefully get someone interested or somebody who wants to collaborate? Is that the plan? Or is it more exploring these different conversations we have?
Well, I mean, it's different for each group. I think a lot of them share some kind of thought of that some connections are going to happen here that are going to lead to action in some fashion. But otherwise, they have different kinds of focus. Like the focus here is on experiments in conversation, like trying different things and learning something from them. That doesn't directly say that we're going to do anything other than have a conversation. I still find it likely that good things come out of that. But at the same time, some of these kinds of meetings might not be satisfying to people who are very sort of more short-term action oriented. Like if you're impatient to get moving with something and you maybe know what that is, it might be very frustrating to sit through lots of people who have thoughts about lots of things and hear how the weather is where they are today and how's it going.
or if you're just bad with small talk like me, then that's difficult too.
Yeah, see, I actually hate small talk too. So in a certain way, this is for me a way of making the small talk more sort of valuable somehow. Like I kind of like starting with nothing. I mean, just with whatever we feel, but I don't want to just talk about sort of superficial stuff. I want to get to, well, what's actually going on for you here? Saying or asking some things that nobody's asking or saying would be interesting.
Well, I have something to ask.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like these group meetings are teaching me a little more give and take in a conversation, listening. When you try to have the idea of everything you add should be inclusive of what's been going on before, not just a complete subject change. That's been a really good exercise for me to learn that and be patient through it, you know. The other thing I think I see is that we have groups of people who know each other who are kind of the same mind that we want to make a difference in the world. And then when another group meets up and they meld, the bubble gets bigger. And so we're having that kind of connection everywhere, hopefully. And then there are things like I felt like with all this identity politics and the way that there's been such a rift between, say, the right and the left. I don't know if it feels like that in the other countries, but it just feels like the rift is so wide. And I've been feeling like something is giving birth, like there's something that's going to happen in the middle where people are going to stop taking a side that benefits them and say, here are our resources, here are our problems, what can we do? You know, like sort of like the cookie jar is always full kind of idea instead of scarcity. You know, hedging your bets, hedging your losses, figuring out when the music stops, can I hold, you know, the most for me? So I see that, and I was like, I wanted to write about it, but I didn't think that I would do it justice compared to, I just knew it was happening out there. and I was looking for the movement and what it would be called. I feel like I see some glimmerings. Did you guys ever hear of the Young Turks?
Hmm.
I don't know who it is, but I've heard it before.
I don't know if it's anybody specific as much as kind of more of a movement, but there are some specific people that you can name, but it doesn't mean that that's all inclusive or exclusive of anyone. Hi, Doug. But anyway, they're pretty much thinkers like Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein and what's his brother's name?
Eric.
Eric, yeah, and all of them, the Dave Rubins, they're all kind of exploring that space in between.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that has something to do with all of this too.
Well, I would like it. I would like it to have, but in a certain way, I feel we are maybe not doing enough of that. Like I feel in this kind of meetings, we mostly agree in a sense. I mean, it's not that we make big manifestos we agree on, but it's mostly sort of pleasant. We're hanging out together, hearing where you're at, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I have personally tried to introduce experiments that would bring in more sort of disagreement, like what do we not agree about, and not with that much success, I think. I mean, I would like to have more sort of dialectic conversations like the Jordan Peterson, Eric Weinstein kind of things, where people who actually have some points of view and they're different and they explore how is that going to work. And I don't think we do that very much here. It's maybe a different. We've maybe tried, but usually we end up sort of just getting along wonderfully, and it's not. We're not, or we shy away from the more intellectual sort of conversation. Like those kinds of conversations happen often between people who are very sort of studied, like either academics or people who really have a huge body of knowledge of things they know, and who are very who can express their opinions very clearly, and at the same time have some of what we have here of being sort of open to people and what's different and interesting about them. So I don't know if it's because we're not particularly academics or something that we're not having that kind of conversations, or because it's more likely to happen between 2 or 3 people, not between 8 or 10 or 12 people. It's hard to have a really hardcore dialectic conversation about something if we're 12 people sitting around. I don't know. I'd like to have more of that kind of thing, and I feel, from my perspective, it's part of what we do. It's part of including people, even if they have different points of view or they come from a different background. That the basic agreement is more like being present, trying to understand, listening, rather than defending your point of view or swaying everybody else to your point of view. So I think it's in that sense connected with what we do.
Well, one of the another thing that they're calling it, I think it was Eric Weinstein coined this term, probably tongue in cheek. He called it the intellectual dark web. Did anyone read that article going around lately?
Yeah, so suddenly, since he called it that, that became a thing, and somebody made a web page, and now people are wondering, well, it's dark web. That sounds sort of a little sinister, and who are these people?
Maybe tongue in cheek.
He probably did, but he's good at coining terms like that. So, and
they're saying that basically, if you have this mindset of wanting to explore things openly and listen to each other, and I thought that the best way he put it was, he compared the East Coast as being kind of more about hedging and protecting your losses and the bottom line right now, and the West Coast was more like, here are all our problems, here are all our resources, let's put our best minds together and get creative and solve this with what we have. And he was saying that they want to move more to that other model, not so much protecting and what can I get and what's in it for me, and when the music stops I want to have the most things. So and he said that basically if you're of that mind, then you're in it, you're part of it, you're part of the movement. You know what I mean? And I think that's really true. I mean, we're all exploring, and that if we have the answers, that's really not it. It's like mostly right now we're just trying to listen and figure out what the heck, you know?
Some tricky parts in it for me is like I said, the people who are most visibly having that kind of conversations, they're very educated and very smart people who have a certain sort of intellectual rigor. They just don't just pass on something they just heard on the internet, or if they do, it's because, well, this is the thing I just heard on the internet. But many of us are sort of, we just read an article and then we kind of somehow think we're experts on this, and that becomes our point of view and our opinion, and then we defend that. And so conversations don't necessarily go that far if we're just sort of throwing a lot of opinions or things we just heard recently around. So what I like and admire about some of those guys is they are really solid. They actually have studied something for years that they talk about. It's not just sort of something they thought of. And at the same time, they are open to learning something new, which is sort of remarkable that they're not just defending it. So I think there's something there to emulate, but I think it's hard that in one sense, many of us are maybe too stupid to do that, or I don't think it has to be intelligence or whether you're a PhD. But it may be more an attitude, like you're ready to admit what you don't know.
Right.
Like there are certain criteria there, which doesn't have to have anything to do with your background. But if you just heard something on the internet, well, it might be true, might be not, but you kind of need to sort of be a little bit objective about where did it come from and what before you sort of pass it on as your point of view. So I don't know, if I just see some difficulties in spreading that culture, even though I'd like to have many more people have intellectually honest, open conversations about things they disagree with. It still requires a certain preparation, which is a little bit tricky, I think.
Well, you know, I feel like maybe we can't sit down and speak from the point of view of a professor who studied something, you know, evolutionary biology or whatever all their life, but we can take the clue of being open to listening to different points of view just as practice, you know, and that if everybody kind of got that vibe going, because it's the people who vote, it's the people who change the world, you know, and maybe these thought leaders are leaders, just that they're giving us an example, a new way to be with each other. Because even socially, I've noticed the change just in the groups of people that I hang around with in everyday life. The rift is so wide, some people don't even want to be with each other anymore, you know, and it's a whole different attitude for everyone to come together and point out their point of view. Just even like a business owner might be pointing out their point of view to a person who works for other people, you know, and vice versa. So it can be at the microcosm of it, even though really it's kind of almost the macrocosm, because we're the bigger part, you know, the people are the bigger group. But anyway, so I thought that was an interesting thing. And I love the idea of kind of talking to people just about the idea of it, to keep an open mind and just stop shutting out other people who don't think like you.
Well, it also changes sort of the approach for expanding your network. Like instead of finding other people who sort of agree with you, or at least have the same vibe, I mean, if the game then becomes finding people who actually have different points of view and different experiences than you, that's a different sort of direction or different approach. There might still be a requirement of that. It's only going to work if these people are actually willing to sit still and talk to you without shouting at you, and they don't get angry and leave and think you're an idiot. So there's a certain human civilized requirement, but otherwise I think it's in some ways much more interesting to find people with totally different points of view. One limiting factor would be, I mean, there are many people with very different points of view who might not think that, for example, this kind of thing, getting together with a bunch of different people to talk about something for no particular good reason other than that you want to, or see what emerges kind of thing. That might sound really flaky to some people, including some of the people I would really like to talk to. So, I mean, this might seem like a particular sort of soft uh, human dialogue, sort of social change kind of thing to do, which might appeal to certain groups of people. Well, we are kind of all over the world, but still it might appeal to a certain subset of the population and not to others. Some people are more like they want to take action, they want to do it right now, we got to make decisions. Or so the question is how to have a conversation with the people who have a different mode or very different points of view. That's not quite clear to me how that would happen.
Well, I feel like I've gotten it to budge a little bit with some people in real life. Like I've got a bunch of girlfriends who are joined all this women's movement and all this stuff, and they go to the meetings and they're up on all the politics now because everybody is now. And yet, when I bring this idea up to them, the idea of listening to the other side instead of resist, their idea is resist. Their idea is really identity politics, and their identity happens to be women. And of course, that's a great cause. But to make it even bigger, to realize that, wait a minute, there's something more than choosing a side. There could be really, really some problem solving, really some opening your mind to the whole problem, really taking the time in your life to get educated. I think a lot of the limitation is the fact that we are working and we have families and we have responsibilities, and then we want to watch TV and see the game, and before you know it, you really don't have time to delve into more than the 5-minute snippet you hear on the news, or I mean, who's sitting around watching 3-hour interviews on YouTube? Not a lot of people.
Right.
But if you turn them on to it, sometimes they might, and then just it creeps in a little bit.
Well, strangely, there are hundreds of thousands of people watching like Dave Rubin interviews, even though they're 2-3 hours sort of intellectual kinds of things. So somehow there's a subset of people who do that.
Right, but not nobody I know, except online. Nobody in my real life, But so then I watch it and I can talk to these people. I'm going off with them in a week. We're going to go to Washington, D.C., 4 girls. So you bet I'm going to be talking to them about this, And who knows what'll come of it? Maybe I'll be the outcast and then won't be invited next time.
So what excites me about these spaces is it's like what reality TV could have been. Can be.
Can
right?
be.
Exactly. There's this kind of substrate of reality that we're accessing through authentically sharing together. And I'm stoked to have conversations with people that have different perspectives. And I think that there's something that happens in groups that have similar desires, intentions. That's really powerful, because there's plenty of contention in that too. Because we don't see things the same way, and that's reality. We each have our specific point of view, things that we've learned, lenses that we see through. And I'm really excited about what it is to capture that reality and consciously create, as constellations of people, conversations that can hold this reality, so that we can all understand it a little bit better and see the different entry points into actions, things we need to understand more deeply, learning how to really both communicate and share what we actually want to, which has been a really cool struggle on my end. I'm like, I've got all these great ideas, but how do I get them from up here out here? and then the practice of listening. How do we actually listen and receive each other? Because personally, I think that that's the capacity that we all need to grow. We can't all be talking at the same time, and each person has a specific point of view. And so the learning for me is like, how do I know when to speak and know when to fade back and listen and and in terms of, I'm really excited to meet John, and really to consider having some of our sessions be live, because I think that puts a nice fire under our butts, to be embodying the purposes that we each are motivated to express. And we're, as Doug says, we have our time and attention. That's what we have. And these spaces are like, okay, so there's 5 of us here focusing our time and attention. How can we use that resource, which is a powerful resource, to be able to understand each other and find what the will of this group is, for this little section of time. And
how is it powerful, Tammy?
what's that?
How is it powerful? How do you feel it's powerful?
I can feel you all. I know you all. And yet there's this great unknown that lies between us. It's like surfing the edge of emergent potentiality. And I sense that within that present moment awareness, as we have greater levels of presence together, that there's an exponential thing that's happening that I can feel on an embodied level, and that I'm looking to match in reality. And so it's this kind of like moving in and out of potential and collective intent that feels like you can't push it, right? It actually is just a coming together of energy that will have a result that can't be controlled by anyone. And that for me is exciting. I can influence, and I can, put my questions out there. And if I'm ever more authentic, I'll probably resonate at the level of the group field, in which case then we have deeper resonance. And that potentiality and intention can be made manifest, I believe, through the present moment awareness and saying the next thing and knowing when to shut up. And with that, I'm complete.
I appreciate everyone being here and kind of listening in. This being my first Zoom session, but not my first open space session or facilitated Zoom call. A little bit just reflective of where I've been and where I'm from and the work that I'm doing. And I really there's so many things that kind of go through my brain on a daily basis in terms of how can we inspire change and bring people together and create conversations that wouldn't normally be had. And I really am thoughtful and proud and glad that technology has got us to the point now where we can all be in the same room in a video conference, that I have the ability to record or broadcast it, and so does Fleming, based on technology, but also in that there are larger pockets and communities out there that yearn for change and for thinking and doing things differently. And we like open space as an organizing method, but also kind of technology as a tool. Like you guys are all comfortable coming in Zoom and navigating and going to a Word document and going into a different Zoom room. Like when I facilitate conversations with people in Zoom, there are people that aren't even there, right? They get nervous that no one can hear them, or they get nervous that they're not in the right space, or if they go and look at their web window and they lose their Google Doc, then they don't know how to get back to the Zoom window, and they fear that everything's all mixed up when really it's all right in front of them. They just have to learn and be comfortable with the technology. And so I think being around people that are comfortable in that space like helps me think about how to help other people like take it to the next level. And that's like integrating the live piece and working together with a couple other people to create a show or to just have a conversation where we can invite other people in, similar to what you guys have done here. I think that's the next step of really beginning to weave a community.
I have a question. Sam has, what is it called? Circle of, Tammy?
CCC.
COI?
Oh, community of impact.
Right, okay. And it's to do good, that you want to do good. And it can be anything. So do you think that it can really be just anything, or is there a certain level that it should at least be above this level? Like, for instance, could it be, I don't know, something really small, shopping for your elderly neighbor? You know what I mean? Can it really be that small? Or when we are doing community of impact, do we really want to try to connect and do something at least above some unspoken level? You know what I mean? What do you
Well,
think?
I think that things in part go a little wrong sometimes by trying to have an absolute common purpose or thing that we do. So we might share a common thing that we really all want to do, or that 3 of us out of 5 want to do, and we're really gung-ho on it. But most of the time, that's not the case. We didn't necessarily show up because we have the same thing we want to do. So I think that the tricky part, or a necessary part, is to navigate that we each have different things, that even we might each personally have different projects and goals that maybe don't involve anybody else, but that somehow will help and trigger others in a positive way to hear about, like your exercise program. That's not something we're going to do together. It's nice to know about. So in a sense, I'm hoping for that we can share more of ourselves, what we actually do and what we actually want to do, without first looking for, well, what's our common thing. So I see that more emerging from realizing, oh, you want to, that matches my thing, so we should work together on this part, and us over here, we should work together on that part. So I see it as a more of a fluid organization system based on seeing each other well enough. And I don't necessarily think this is well enough. We see a lot of ourselves, of each other here, but we're really only looking at video screens. We pick up things like from seeing what you have, how you've decorated your living room, Cheryl, or from seeing what Tammy has behind her. But that's only part of it. I would love to have more ways of, well, what is that? You have this thing to hang clothes on. Yeah. So if I would love for ways of having more sort of incidental, peripheral things showing up. Doesn't have to mean that we turn our lives into a total 24-hour reality show, but I want some of that aspect, that you pick up things that are in each other's spaces that can match somehow. And so I want us to have more collective intelligence, which is one thing I'm hoping will happen. We need more of a surface between us, not just what we choose to present or what we accidentally left in the picture, but more, so that I can see, well, John is interested in that thing, but he hasn't said anything about it, but we can connect on that. So with that, I think it can become something very fluid, where even the very personal side projects that you didn't think would interest anybody else, there's somehow a match, or somebody else has the resource you need, or you become a resource because you became an expert in this part, or you have this thing lying around that you don't need. So if somehow there could be a fluid way of doing that, that wouldn't waste hours and hours to make an inventory of all those things, that becomes boring, but some other way related to showing up here, then it just becomes flowing with whatever you see, whatever you're excited about. When something matches, you want to see the same movie or the same match or something, well, then we can go together. Or so it's really just matching when there's a match, and not wasting time on it when there's not. I don't have a system for that, but I can imagine that we're moving in that direction.
I like that too, Fleming. I like seeing a little more about people's lives, because you get to know them a lot, oddly, by, what they're showing in the background, almost like when you were walking that one time through your property, and you walked through some kind of a building that had a broken window. It was like, wow, this has so much mystique. It's like, I wonder how old this place is. I wonder what the history and the story is. And just by you taking that walk while you did that, I was just like so intrigued with the whole thing. And then that other time you walked around that circle area, and then Tammy, I think you did one on a porch once, maybe at your mom's house. That's all very interesting, because you know, you can get closer to people quicker just by seeing them in their world, you know? And like right now, I'm wondering about John's background. Show, news, what is this?
You're muted, John.
Yeah. Sorry about that. My my backdrop is G1NBC TV, and I found G1NBC TV on Craigslist in 2007. My background is in organizational development, so it really is in facilitating like large scale change for the organizations that we work with. But I have a passion for media and creating media, and so I've been collaborating, facilitating, helping build that organization since then. And in return, I'm the Cuyahoga County affiliate for Cleveland. And really, it's more of it's like a bottom up media company, where our vision, our goal is to create shows and connect people in the local community, to get media spotlights that they might not normally get, or to create shows that that have more local actors and work in partnership with local businesses and things like that to help make that happen.
Wow, I love that.
And so it really started out with this. The owner lives in Livingston County, Michigan, and had the concept. And so now I would say it's up to, I think we have about 12 or 13 affiliates, and we're planning a broader outreach here this year.
So do you interview business owners and things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I like that. How does that go? Because I was thinking that would be a great idea.
It is a good idea. It does have it's obviously challenging talking with people about new media and about kind of like a startup network for the people, or a bottom up network where you're actually like taking content and pushing it out rather than getting content from the network and pushing it to people. So it works. People like it, but sustaining it as a business model is the challenge. And so figuring out the best ways to do that is a continual conversation for all of us.
Are there actually shows generated in one affiliate that are syndicated out across all of them? Or is it more sort of local?
It's more local right now. The intention is to have the affiliates do syndication, but we have to have the affiliates in order to do that kind of stuff too. So it's really more now of trying to inspire affiliates to come on board, and then the ones that do is sharing those shows with each other and figuring out what are the best ways to market, to pitch, to show people, and to talk about the network as a whole. And my space really is kind of like what I said in the other group, is really doing the live streaming portion, like taking conversations like this and helping people crystallize like what a show concept would look like, and then helping produce it using the broadcasting software.
Are you able to detect how many people are viewing?
Yeah, it depends on the platform that you're on. So I'll broadcast to YouTube, Facebook, DLive, and all of those. I just have a separate window open, and they'll tell you how many people are watching live. And then I also, depending on the show, I'll take the chat from wherever I'm broadcasting and bring that as an overlay piece of the broadcast, so people can see their chat in real time as they're going through the show.
And so that doesn't require a thumbs up for the person to indicate that they're watching or something like that. You can just literally, when they tune in, you have the number.
Correct.
So it could be interesting for groups like ours here to explore that more. Like what would be the different dynamic if this was live and there were more people watching? Maybe some people are not ready to show up for a conversation showing your face recorded and watched for an hour, but maybe you would feel you participate by sort of being there, or maybe asking a question or something. Could be an interesting different dynamic.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed is really finding live streamers where they're at. So if you use YouTube or DLive, those folks are more comfortable with a concept like this where you just put up a link or an invitation and say, we're broadcasting live, come on in. Because if you the better you tap into that community, which is people that live stream themselves playing video games, people that just live stream in general and stuff like that, I think that those people would gravitate more towards something like this. But then, if, like what Cheryl said, talk to people about it and invite them, and they'll come in. Like we did a live streaming show last year just on sports, and so depending on the topic, we would have different people come in because that topic resonated with them. And so each show was kind of different depending on the topic. That's another organizing point for future conversations, I think. Think about the themes for the space, and sometimes depending on the theme that you choose, that will also determine who shows up.
People ever show up and railroad it in some negative way?
Luckily, no, but I know that's a possibility.
Can you kick
With
them
it, you can mute people. Like
Disappear.
Fleming could mute us if we wanted. He could probably boot us off too.
Can you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, technical difficulty.
Well, I haven't.
Like, oh, John.
It doesn't
Bye,
bother me.
John. You're talking too much. You're taking.
Yeah, you're taking way too much time. You think it's suddenly your show. What's going on?
Be like Johnny Carson. Put him in the lower chair. So what do you feel about the question? I have two questions. I don't know if they matter. One is efficiency. Do you feel like this is an efficient way for us to reach each other, or just a way?
I think it has the potential to be the most efficient way in terms of aligning intent. And, this is opt-in. Like if you're showing up, I mean, part of the reason why John hasn't probably had many railroaders show up is that people are, they're choosing to be there, and they're also choosing to be live. So it's kind of obvious to everyone if you're being a jerk. And so it's that kind of reputational efficiency in terms of who do you want to be? Because you know what? That's who you are, and that's how people are going to take you. So I think that there's a efficiency that sits in that reputation of who you want to show up as. And what I love about the live idea is that it raises the stakes. It raises the stakes from many of the conversations that I've been having and with some of you here they're recorded and they're posted, but they're not, we can choose later if we want to record, if we want to share it or not, for example. And some of them have been like, oh no, let's not share that one. But yeah, I love the immediacy of live, and I'd like to start playing in that space more.
So now regarding that efficiency question, and then also this, I think you're kind of assuming, by you, I mean in general, people might assume that there's a certain level of competence when the people join. But if enough people who are like really incompetent, maybe they're not really clear thinkers, and maybe they think that their reputation is okay to get on and just yell about something. And just because they're not higher level thinkers, say, at the risk of sounding, like we're better than them, not saying that, but kind of saying that theoretically, that the masses, really seriously, the masses are not up to this. And if they came in, it could be a whole different thing. And there could be a lot of them. Because just like you were saying, Fleming, there are a lot of people that watch Dave Rubin, but it's not the masses. If the masses were really part of that conversation, it would be so railroaded downhill. And this leads me to my second question. And I'm not saying I know the answer to this question, but Tammy was talking about when you rule by the people, get the people to take the vote. But when you really get the people, if you were really to theoretically get all the people to take the vote, I mean, this is like the question of, should there be elite rule, like China has chosen, for example? They are the professionals, the thinkers, the educated ones. If we really had the masses of humanity in the United States, for instance, all vote, every single person, when maybe half of the people in the inner city are hanging in the streets and, you know, they're not paying attention to anything. They round them up on a bus, take them to vote. You know, what would we have? Would we have something that netted better or netted worse? So you can say that it would net better if we could get out the corruption, but it might net worse if we're only talking about educated people versus the masses of the generally ones who are not paying attention, suddenly throwing chaos into the whole mix. So I'm curious about thoughts on that.
I think you got some points there. There's potentially something we could call a type of elitism, but which doesn't have to be. Like for us to have a constructive conversation, it requires certain skills that not everybody has. And sometimes people show up who somehow are not able to, and we need to be able to deal with that. But I would also claim that it's not necessarily a question of education or even intelligence. I think pretty much anybody who's willing to learn a few things and who can sit still and pay attention can learn to have a generative conversation or being present. I mean, it's perfectly all right to be quiet and just listen. That doesn't require huge intelligence. It's difficult for some people, but you can learn that. So I'm thinking that even by having more of these kinds of things, because there's a bit of an entry barrier to do it, that in a certain sense guarantees to some degree that it will work out pretty well most of the time. So that could become a way of filtering the masses in a sense. I agree with you. If you just give if totally random people in the world a microphone, or you take the average of what they think, that's not necessarily going to be pretty. So this could be a way of cultivating good conversation, listening skills, thinking together, being ready to work with emerges in a group of people. That's all useful things, which right now can look a little bit elitist. I mean, this is people who show up for this are sort of people who somehow have some skill or experience in this. But it doesn't have to be. Really, anybody could be welcome who's willing to do that. But I think it could be used to our advantage, maybe to make it more likely that these things play well. That most of the time it would probably be good TV to broadcast what we're doing, because there's a self-selecting kind of thing. The people who are likely to screw it up are not all that likely to show up, although some of them will. But if we're well enough sort of grounded in what this is, it's not a problem to deal with somebody who doesn't get it, because that's kind of visible to everybody, including the audience. So as long as we don't freak out about it, we just deal with a troublemaker can be dealt with without too much trouble. And that's actually interesting and educational as well. So there are some fertile ideas in that, I think.
Yeah,
So-
I wasn't sure. Oh, go ahead, Doug.
No, I just wanted to throw out, I sort of turned that telescope around. So hierarchies and stratification and elitism and all of that are sort of phenomena of the current paradigm that we're living in, and look at where it's gotten us. Like really smart people are the ones, you know, consuming our planet like a race car in ethanol and marginalizing, you know, 98% of the global population. So the real question is, if we want to avoid an extinction cliff, it's all of us or none of us.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's all of us versus none of us, then the value system and the orientation that, for me, has sort of locked and loaded is zero barrier to entry and all being welcome. And how do we include? And how do we enable and enfranchise? And how do we invite? And for, you know, probably 7.45 billion of the 7.5 billion people on the planet, on a threshold issue, how much work is involved just creating the channel and enough safety for them to be able to rear their head and say something. So, so I come at it much more from the more open and the better we get as human beings at relating to each other and figuring out how to deal with each other, how to interact with each other, and how to come from a place of generosity and openness, is sort of, square one at doing us differently and maybe actually not going extinct. And I think there is sort of a natural sorting and sifting in just the fact that a huge number of the have-nots have no prayer of ever getting to this medium in this way to even participate. But the ones that manage to work their way here, if they're stepping up and saying, I'm making a choice and putting my time and attention here, all are welcome. And I think on an extrapolated basis, John, in terms of your work and what makes it really awesome to me as a, in the right direction, people use the term lurkers and it's sort of judgmental and it's sort of dismissive, but I have never, ever, ever believed that somebody who is devoting their time and attention, even if they're invisible and they're not expressive, contributive in an overt or explicit way, that is value and energy. It adds to things anytime. And there are ripple effects that are invisible, and there's power in that. And I'll take 1.5 million lurkers over, a handful of rabid ideologues watching InfoWars any day. So, so anyway, so that's just, from the diehard, humanist in the top right corner.
Well, maybe my question is more optimistic. I'm thinking further down the line when more people are getting into it, and it's not so, it's more of the general sea of humanity. I often wonder if that's going to dumb it down, which is not a nice way to put it, but you know what I mean? Like when you have all the intellectuals talking about great ideas and then people start joining, there comes a point where you're going to dilute it down to something that's really undesirable when the vote starts going the way of the true masses. It's more of a question, not a,
Yeah, we should wrap up in a moment, but just one comment on that. Well, it totally depends on how one addresses it. Like, I agree in the sense that everybody has something to contribute. Everybody has a place. Everybody's welcome. But there's a problem when one tries to sort of play the part of another. Like, for example, if it sounds like we're having a really intellectual discussion about things we know, somebody else who comes in who might not be that great at that might think they need to express some things they know and might end up looking a little stupid because they didn't really know anything about that. Whereas there would be great value in actually getting their perspective from where they're at honestly and authentically. So very often it goes wrong by trying to pretend we need to do something else. Like, now I need to talk and have a comment on what the other person said, but maybe I don't know, I'm not good at that. But I may be good at saying what I do every day, and that would be much more interesting. So there's a place for everybody, but there's also a place for sort of learning how to have or find your own authentic way, which is not the same as everybody else's.
Yeah, and I think as long as there are strong conversation facilitators, and as long as the community that's kind of hosting or supporting the conversation understands kind of the guidelines and underlying principles, I think open space as a method in and of itself allows for that type of self-organization, and just understands that that individuals gravitate towards that. And you might have something later that is like the naysayers hour or something like that, where or the angry hour, and everybody who has something they want to get off their chest goes into that room and kind of decompresses. But I think there's creative ways that we can set that up and mitigate some of that, and also like everyone said, deepen those connections and get them to where they need to be in order to be productive and healthy in the space.
I'm curious. I just in thinking of some of the pieces that I've deeply considered from Doug's work in terms of the industrial paradigm. I wonder if there's a hidden thing around all of us having the same conversation at the same time. You know what I mean? There's like this top level, we're all doing this. I don't think that that's representative of the way an ecosystem works or the natural world works. And I have this phrase that I've been playing with, which is, we have all the time in the world. Because I definitely feel this sense of present moment, holy shit, we are going off the cliff. But then there's this piece around, there's 7.6 billion of us, or 5, or whatever the current number is. And each one of us can speak and each one of us can listen. What is that distributed? What is the net coherence of us really distributing those conversations and giving people entry points into their small little group of people that are having conversations? And what better to put people who, the diversity of people into conversations as well. I think that's part of what we're also up to and pushing into is how can we have the intellectual, the person that's, on the ground, someone that doesn't actually know how to write a language. How brilliant is that to bring in someone that has those other senses that they've developed, because they don't actually write stuff down. Like that kind of rhizomatic intelligence is, I think, what we're aiming to embody. And I'm excited about what that can look like to distribute power and see our world from many eyes.
That sounds wonderful. We've passed the hour, so if anybody feels like wrapping it up, we don't have to, but we can do a little meta look at how did this experiment work, how did this conversation work, which it was about network weaving. It got off into other aspects. I found it very interesting. What do you guys think?
That was the fastest hour I ever experienced in this group.
Wow.
I might have guessed it at 15 minutes.
It was fun. Yeah, it was good. I think that you did a good job too of kind of like harnessing all the individual things we were saying and kept it into a nice flow, and you all did as well.
It was great to have you here, and you're welcome at any time. This group, in one form or another, meets every Wednesday at approximately the same time with a different theme or different experiment each time, but it's never been bad.
It's been really nice to talk to you, John. Nice to meet you today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cher.
Ditto on that.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. It was good to be here.
I friended you up already
What? Where?
on Facebook.
All right.
Look me up.
I look forward to confirming it.
Last name.
Okay, I will.
John, what's your last name?
Mine? Spalding. I put it in the Google Doc too,
Oh, okay.
with my email address and all that stuff.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, lovely to meet you. Lovely to see all of you. And thank you for making this another wonderful conversational experiment. See you another time. Have a great day, all of you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Flo.
Bye.
Take care.